Emily's 8th birthday dawned with a crisp autumn chill in the air. Leaves of crimson and gold danced in the breeze outside her window, and the house was filled with the tantalizing aroma of freshly baked cinnamon rolls. Emily had always loved her birthday, not just for the presents and the cake, but for the cozy warmth and joy that seemed to envelop her home each year. This year, however, there was an air of anticipation that felt different, almost electric. As she descended the stairs, her eyes widened at the sight of a large, beautifully wrapped box sitting on the living room floor. Her parents, Alice and Robert, were smiling, but there was something in their eyes. Was it excitement or a hint of unease? "Happy birthday, sweetheart," her mother exclaimed, giving her a warm hug. "This one is from Grandma Ethel. She said it's something very special." Emily tore off the wrapping paper with eager hands, revealing an intricately detailed dollhouse. It was exquisite, crafted from dark, polished wood, with tiny, perfect replicas of Victorian-era furniture and delicate lace curtains in the windows. The craftsmanship was so fine that it seemed almost lifelike. "Oh, it's beautiful!" Emily gasped, her eyes sparkling with delight. She immediately began exploring each room, marveling at the tiny beds, tables, and miniature chandeliers. But as she touched the dollhouse, a chill ran down her spine. She shivered, brushing it off as excitement. Alice and Robert exchanged a glance. "Are you sure about this?" Alice whispered. "It's just a dollhouse," Robert replied, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. As the day wore on, Emily could hardly tear herself away from her new treasure. She played with the little porcelain dolls, arranging them in the tiny rooms and imagining grand tea parties and elegant balls. But as night fell, and the house settled into its usual nighttime silence, the dollhouse seemed to change. Emily woke in the middle of the night, drawn by a faint whispering sound. Rubbing her eyes, she slipped out of bed and padded across the room to where the dollhouse sat. The whispers grew louder, almost like a conversation, but too faint to make out the words. She leaned in closer, her heart pounding in her chest. The dollhouse was illuminated by the pale moonlight streaming through her window. For a moment, Emily thought she saw tiny shadows moving within the miniature rooms. She blinked, shaking her head. It was just her imagination, she told herself. But as she turned to go back to bed, she could have sworn she heard a soft, sorrowful sigh. The next morning, Emily tried to tell her parents about the strange sounds, but they dismissed it as a dream. "It's probably just the wind," Robert said, ruffling her hair. "Nothing to worry about." But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The dollhouse was beautiful, yes, but it also felt alive. And as she played with it in the days that followed, she noticed other oddities. The dolls would sometimes be in different positions than she left them, and doors that she was sure she'd closed would be open. One evening, as she was setting the table in the dollhouse's dining room, she found a tiny, intricately carved key under one of the chairs. It didn't seem to fit any of the doors in the house. Curious, she showed it to her mother. Alice examined the key, her brow furrowing. "That's strange," she murmured. "I've never seen this before." That night, Emily placed the key on her bedside table, hoping to figure out its purpose. As she drifted off to sleep, she was once again awoken by the soft whispers. This time, they were clearer, and she could almost make out the words. It sounded like a plea for help. Trembling, Emily approached the dollhouse. The tiny rooms were bathed in an eerie glow, and as she watched, the dolls began to move. They turned their tiny porcelain heads towards her, their painted eyes glinting in the dim light. One of them, a woman in a flowing dress, raised her tiny hand and pointed to the hidden compartment in the floor that Emily had never noticed before. With a shaking hand, Emily reached out and opened the compartment. Inside was a tiny diary, its cover worn and faded. She opened it, revealing pages filled with delicate handwriting. The first entry read, "We are trapped. Help us." Emily's heart raced as she realized that the dollhouse was not just a toy. It was a prison for the spirits of the original owners of the house it replicated, and they were reaching out to her, begging for freedom. Emily's hands trembled as she clutched the tiny diary. Her mind raced with questions. Who were these trapped spirits? How did they become imprisoned within the dollhouse? And most importantly, how could she help them? Unable to sleep, she spent the rest of the night reading the diary by the dim light of her bedside lamp. The handwriting was neat and elegant, belonging to a woman named Margaret. Each entry painted a vivid picture of life in the grand Victorian mansion that the dollhouse replicated. As Emily delved deeper into the diary, the entries grew darker and more desperate. April 12th, 1893. The house is ours, and it is magnificent. We have moved in with such high hopes for the future. James is already planning renovations, and the children are delighted with their new rooms. June 5th, 1893. Strange occurrences have begun. At first it was little things, misplaced items, whispers in the night. But now I feel an oppressive presence watching us. James dismisses it as my imagination, but I know something is wrong. October 31st, 1893. The whispers have turned to screams. We cannot leave the house. Every attempt is thwarted by some unseen force. My children are terrified, and James is no longer the man I married. The darkness is consuming us. The final entry was the most chilling of all. November 15th, 1893. We are trapped, our souls bound to this place by a curse I do not understand. If you are reading this, please help us. Find the key to break the curse and set us free. Emily's eyes flicked to the tiny key on her bedside table. Was this the key Margaret mentioned? And if so, how was she supposed to use it to free the spirits? Over breakfast, Emily hesitated before showing the diary to her parents. She knew they were skeptical, but she needed their help. "Mom, Dad, you need to see this," she said, her voice trembling. Alice and Robert exchanged concerned glances but took the diary from Emily. As they read through the entries, their expressions shifted from disbelief to horror. "This can't be real," Robert muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. Alice, however, was more open-minded. "There have been stories about that old house," she said quietly. "They say it's been haunted for over a century. Maybe this dollhouse is somehow connected to it." Determined to learn more, they decided to visit the local library to research the history of the house. The librarian, a kindly woman named Mrs. Dawson, led them to the archives where old newspapers and records were stored. As they pored over the documents, a tragic story emerged. The house, known as the Hawthorne Mansion, had indeed been the site of mysterious and tragic events. The original owners, James and Margaret Hawthorne, along with their 2 children, had vanished without a trace in late 1893. Neighbors reported hearing screams and seeing strange lights, but the family was never found. Subsequent owners experienced a series of misfortunes, and the house was eventually abandoned, gaining a reputation as a place of evil. Local legend spoke of restless spirits and a curse that trapped their souls within the walls of the mansion. Emily felt a chill as she realized the full gravity of the situation. The dollhouse was not just a replica. It was a conduit for the spirits of the Hawthorne family, bound by a curse that had trapped them for over a century. As they left the library, Emily's mind was racing. She was determined to help the Hawthorns, but she didn't know where to start. The diary and the key were clues, but she needed more information to break the curse. That night, as she lay in bed, the whispers returned, clearer than ever. This time, they formed words she could understand. "Find the locket. The locket will set us free." Emily's heart pounded. A locket. It was another piece of the puzzle. She resolved to find it no matter what it took. The next day, she would search the dollhouse for any hidden compartments or clues. She was now the Hawthorne family's only hope, and she wouldn't let them down. Unbeknownst to Emily, as she drifted off to sleep, the dollhouse glowed faintly, and the tiny figures within seemed to watch her with a mixture of hope and desperation. The past and present were converging, and Emily was at the center of a mystery that spanned generations. The next morning, Emily wasted no time. As soon as breakfast was over, she hurried back to her room and positioned herself in front of the dollhouse. She examined it meticulously, looking for any hidden compartments or secret mechanisms. The intricate design and fine craftsmanship made it difficult to discern any irregularities, but Emily was determined. Her parents checked in on her periodically, sharing concerned glances but allowing her to continue her investigation. Hours passed, and just as Emily began to feel discouraged, she noticed a tiny, almost imperceptible groove along the base of the living room floor. With a careful tug, she lifted a hidden panel, revealing a small velvet pouch. Her heart raced as she opened the pouch, revealing an ornate silver locket. It was beautifully crafted, with delicate filigree work and a tiny clasp. Emily carefully opened the locket, finding a small portrait of a woman and a child inside. She felt a shiver run down her spine as she realized the woman in the portrait was Margaret Hawthorne, the same woman who had written the diary. As evening approached, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the locket was the key to breaking the curse. She decided to keep it close, slipping it into her pocket before heading downstairs for dinner. Her parents, noticing her preoccupation, asked about her findings, but she only gave them a brief summary, not wanting to worry them further. That night, as the house settled into its usual silence, the whispers returned. Emily lay in bed, clutching the locket tightly, her ears straining to make out the words. The voices were clearer now, almost as if they were right next to her. "Emily, help us," a woman's voice pleaded. "The locket holds the key." Emily sat up, her pulse quickening. "How do I help you?" she whispered into the darkness. "Place the locket in the dollhouse," the voice instructed. "It will reveal the way." Gathering her courage, Emily climbed out of bed and approached the dollhouse. She placed the locket in the center of the living room, exactly where she had found the hidden compartment. As soon as the locket touched the tiny floor, the entire dollhouse began to glow with an eerie, otherworldly light. The dolls, previously motionless, started to move again. They arranged themselves around the locket, forming a circle. The air grew cold, and a gust of wind blew through Emily's room, causing the curtains to flutter wildly. She watched in awe and fear as the dolls raised their tiny hands, and the locket began to levitate. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices overlapping in a haunting melody. The locket opened, and a beam of light shot out, illuminating a small, previously unnoticed door on the side of the dollhouse. Emily's hands trembled as she reached for the door, pulling it open to reveal a staircase leading downward. In her mind, she heard Margaret's voice once more. "Descend the stairs and find the heart of the house. There you will find what you need to break the curse." With trembling hands, Emily reached inside the dollhouse. her fingers brushing against the tiny staircase. As her hand made contact, she felt a strange sensation, as if she were being pulled inward. She gasped as the room around her blurred, and she found herself standing at the top of a grand staircase, identical to the one she had seen in the dollhouse. The walls were adorned with old faded portraits, and the air was thick with the scent of dust and decay. She realized she was no longer in her bedroom, but within a spectral version of the Hawthorne mansion. Emily's heart pounded as she descended the staircase, each step echoing through the empty halls. Shadows danced on the walls, and the whispers grew louder, guiding her deeper into the house. She reached the bottom of the stairs and found herself in a large, dimly lit room. At the center stood an ornate pedestal, and upon it lay a weathered book bound in black leather. The whispers urged her forward. "The book contains the spell. Use it to free us." Emily approached the pedestal, her fingers brushing the cover of the book. She took a deep breath and opened it, revealing pages filled with ancient, arcane symbols. She couldn't understand the language, but the words seemed to pulse with a life of their own. As she read aloud, the room began to tremble, and the shadows intensified. The spirits of the Hawthorne family appeared before her, their forms translucent and ethereal. They watched with hopeful eyes as Emily recited the incantation, her voice growing stronger with each word. A blinding light filled the room, and Emily felt a surge of energy course through her. The spirits began to fade, their expressions of torment replaced with gratitude and peace. Margaret's voice echoed in her mind one last time. "Thank you, Emily. You have set us free." The light intensified, enveloping Emily in its warmth. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, she was back in her bedroom, the dollhouse before her. The locket lay in its center, now dark and lifeless. Emily felt a sense of calm and relief wash over her. The whispers were gone, and the oppressive atmosphere had lifted. The Hawthorne family was finally at peace. As she lay down to sleep, Emily knew that her life had been forever changed by the ghostly dollhouse. She had faced her fears and helped to end a century-old curse. But she couldn't help but wonder if other secrets still lingered within the shadows of her mysterious gift, waiting to be discovered. The days following the ritual were surprisingly calm. Emily felt a sense of peace and accomplishment, knowing she had freed the spirits trapped within the dollhouse. Yet, as much as she tried to move on, a lingering curiosity kept pulling her back to the mysterious gift. The locket and the diary, now resting quietly in her room, seemed to call out to her, begging to reveal more of their secrets. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows stretched across her room, Emily found herself drawn to the dollhouse once again. She sat cross-legged in front of it, her fingers tracing the delicate carvings on its exterior. The dollhouse, now silent and still, felt different, less menacing, but still full of untold stories. Her parents noticed her preoccupation. "Emily, is everything okay?" Alice asked gently, kneeling beside her daughter. "You seem a bit distant lately." Emily hesitated, unsure how to explain the pull she felt towards the dollhouse. "I think there's more to it, Mom. The locket and the diary, they're like pieces of a puzzle, but I feel like there are still pieces missing." Alice exchanged a glance with Robert, who nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe you're right," he said. "But let's not forget the toll this has taken on you. If there's more to discover, we should be careful." That night, as Emily lay in bed, the familiar whispers returned. This time, however, they were different. Not the desperate pleas of trapped spirits, but soft, comforting murmurs. They seemed to be guiding her, urging her to explore further. Unable to resist, Emily slipped out of bed and approached the dollhouse. She noticed something she hadn't seen before. A small, ornate keyhole at the base of the structure, cleverly concealed among the intricate woodwork. With a sense of anticipation, she retrieved the tiny key from the hidden compartment and inserted it into the keyhole. The dollhouse shuddered slightly as the key turned. A hidden door swung open, revealing a new room she had never seen before. Inside, the dolls stood arranged in a circle, their faces turned towards a central figure, a doll that looked remarkably like Emily herself. Emily gasped, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out to touch the doll, and as her fingers made contact, a wave of energy coursed through her. The room around her seemed to blur and shift, and she found herself standing in the grand hall of the Hawthorne mansion once more. This time, however, the house was different. It was filled with light and warmth, and the oppressive atmosphere was gone. The spirits of the Hawthorne family were nowhere to be seen, but Emily sensed their presence watching over her. As she explored the mansion, she felt a strange connection to the place. It was as if she were walking through her own memories, seeing the house not as a haunted relic, but as a living, breathing home. She wandered through the rooms, marveling at the beauty and grandeur of the mansion in its prime. In the library, she found a portrait of Margaret Hawthorne, her eyes kind and full of wisdom. Beside it was a smaller portrait of a young girl who looked just like Emily. A chill ran down her spine as she realized the girl in the portrait was a younger version of Margaret's daughter, Lillian. Emily felt a tug at her heart, an inexplicable sense of belonging. She reached out to touch the portrait, and as she did, she heard Margaret's voice once more. "Emily, you have a connection to this place, to us. You are part of our story." Confused and overwhelmed, Emily stumbled back, her mind racing with questions. Was she somehow related to the Hawthornes? How could that be possible? Before she could ponder further, the room began to fade, and Emily found herself back in her bedroom, the dollhouse standing quietly before her. The hidden room was gone, the dolls back in their original positions, but the feeling of connection remained, stronger than ever. Emily knew she had to find out more about her family's history and its link to the Hawthorne mansion. She felt a newfound determination to uncover the truth, not just for herself, but for the spirits who had entrusted her with their story. The whispers were no longer a source of fear, they were a guiding force, leading her towards a deeper understanding of the past. Emily was ready to embrace her role as the keeper of the dollhouse's secrets, prepared to face whatever mysteries lay ahead. The days turned into weeks, and Emily's sense of connection to the Hawthorne mansion grew stronger. She spent hours researching her family history, delving into old photo albums and genealogy websites. Her parents, though concerned, supported her curiosity, hoping it would lead to closure. One crisp autumn afternoon, Emily sat in the attic, sifting through a dusty old trunk filled with family heirlooms. She found an old photograph of a large family gathering, taken in front of a grand house that looked strikingly similar to the Hawthorne mansion. Among the faces, she spotted a young girl who looked remarkably like herself. "Mom, Dad, come look at this," Emily called, her voice echoing in the attic. Alice and Robert hurried up the stairs, peering over her shoulder at the photograph. "That's my great-grandmother Lillian," Alice said softly. "I remember seeing pictures of her when I was a child, but I never knew she lived in a house like that." Emily's mind raced. If Lillian was her great-grandmother, then the connection she felt to the Hawthorne mansion made sense. But there was still so much she didn't understand. That night, as Emily lay in bed, the whispers returned, more insistent than before. They seemed to be urging her to return to the dollhouse. She slipped out of bed, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. She knew she was close to uncovering the truth. As she approached the dollhouse, the air grew colder. The tiny figures inside were arranged differently, their faces turned towards a single point, the diary. Emily picked it up, her hands trembling. She flipped through the pages until she found a section she hadn't noticed before, written in a different, shakier hand. June 15th, 1893. The darkness is closing in. James has become distant, and I fear for my children. There is something evil in this house, something that seeks to consume us all. October 31st, 1893. James is gone. He vanished without a trace, and I am left alone with the children. I fear the house has claimed him. The whispers grow louder each night, and I am powerless to stop them. November 15th, 1893. It is not just the house. There is a presence, a malevolent force that has taken hold of us. We are trapped, and I fear we will never escape. If you find this, please, do not let it claim you as well. Emily's heart raced as she read the final entry. The Hawthorns had not only been haunted by restless spirits but by a dark force that had taken hold of their home. The dollhouse was a conduit, not just for the spirits of the Hawthorn family, but for the malevolent entity that had trapped them. She realized with growing horror that the entity had not been vanquished with the release of the Hawthorn spirits. It was still present, lurking within the dollhouse, waiting to claim its next victim. As she pondered this, a cold wind blew through her room, extinguishing the light from her bedside lamp. The dollhouse began to glow with an eerie, malevolent light. The tiny figures inside twisted and contorted, their faces now grotesque and fearsome. A deep, guttural voice filled the room. "You have meddled where you should not have, child. The curse is not broken, merely shifted. You will take their place." Emily felt a wave of fear wash over her, but she stood her ground. "I won't let you take me," she said, her voice trembling but determined. The voice laughed, a sound that chilled her to the bone. "You have no choice. The curse is eternal." Desperate, Emily reached for the locket, hoping it would offer some protection. As her fingers closed around it, she felt a surge of energy. The whispers of the Hawthorn spirits filled her mind, giving her strength. "You can break the curse," Margaret's voice said, urgent and clear. "Find the source of the darkness and destroy it." With renewed determination, Emily turned back to the dollhouse. The tiny figures writhed and twisted, but she ignored them, focusing on the hidden door she had discovered before. She opened it and descended the staircase, finding herself once again in the spectral version of the Hawthorn mansion. The house was darker this time, the oppressive atmosphere pressing in on her. Shadows flickered and danced, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. Emily felt the malevolent presence growing stronger, its power almost overwhelming. She made her way to the basement where she felt the darkness was strongest. The door creaked open, revealing a room filled with ancient, arcane symbols carved into the walls and floor. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, and upon it lay a black crystal, pulsating with a sinister energy. "This is it," Emily whispered. "The source of the curse." She reached out to touch the crystal, and a shock of cold energy shot through her. The malevolent voice screamed in rage, its power lashing out at her. But Emily held firm, focusing on the locket and the spirits of the Hawthorn family. "You cannot defeat me," the voice roared. Emily closed her eyes, summoning all her courage. "I will free you," she whispered. "I will end this curse." With a final surge of strength, she shattered the crystal. The room exploded with light, and the darkness was obliterated. The malevolent presence screamed one last time before fading into nothingness. Emily found herself back in her room, the dollhouse dark and silent. The locket lay in her hand, warm and comforting. The curse was broken, and the Hawthorne spirits were finally at peace. As she drifted off to sleep, Emily knew that she had uncovered the sinister secret of the dollhouse and freed her family from its grasp. The whispers were gone, and the malevolent force had been vanquished, but the memory of the ghostly dollhouse would stay with her forever, a reminder of the darkness that once threatened to consume her. The relief Emily felt after breaking the crystal was short-lived. Though the whispers had ceased and the malevolent force seemed vanquished, an unsettling feeling lingered in the air. The dollhouse, once a source of wonder and terror, now stood quiet and dark, yet Emily couldn't shake the sense that something still wasn't right. A few nights later, as the moon cast an eerie glow over her room, Emily woke to the sound of faint crying. She sat up, her heart pounding. The crying seemed to emanate from the dollhouse, soft and sorrowful. She approached it cautiously, wondering if the spirits were truly at rest or if something new had taken their place. As she neared the dollhouse, the crying grew louder, more desperate. Emily's hand trembled as she reached for the tiny front door, pushing it open. Inside, she saw the dolls huddled together, their porcelain faces twisted in fear and sorrow. One of the dolls, the one that resembled Margaret Hawthorne, turned its head towards Emily and whispered, "It's not over. The darkness still holds us." Emily's blood ran cold. She had thought the curse was broken, but it seemed there was more to the story. Determined to uncover the truth, she decided to confront the darkness head-on. She grabbed the locket and the diary, hoping they would guide her once again. As she read through the diary, a previously unnoticed passage caught her eye. It described a hidden chamber beneath the mansion, a place where the darkest rituals had been performed. Emily realized she had to find this chamber if she had any hope of ending the curse once and for all. The next day, Emily told her parents about her discovery. Though they were hesitant, they agreed to help her investigate further. They contacted a local historian, Mr. Thompson, who was knowledgeable about the Hawthorne mansion and its dark past. Mr. Thompson arrived that afternoon, carrying a stack of old maps and documents. "The Hawthorne mansion has a long history of tragedy and mystery," he explained. "It's said that James Hawthorne dabbled in dark magic, seeking to harness the power of an ancient entity. The hidden chamber you mentioned might be the key to understanding what happened." Together, they examined the old maps, looking for clues. Finally, they found a reference to a secret passageway in the basement of the mansion, leading to a chamber deep underground. Emily felt a mix of fear and determination. She knew she had to enter that chamber, but she didn't know what awaited her. That night, Emily lay awake, clutching the locket. The dollhouse remained silent, but she knew it was only a matter of time before the darkness returned. As she drifted off to sleep, she heard Margaret's voice in her mind once more. "Be brave, Emily. The chamber holds the truth." The following day, Emily and her parents drove to the old mansion. Though it had been abandoned for years, its imposing structure still loomed over the surrounding landscape. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding as they approached the front door. Inside, the mansion was cold and dark, its once grand interior now covered in dust and cobwebs. Emily led the way to the basement, her flashlight cutting through the gloom. They found the hidden passageway behind a rotting bookshelf, just as the map had indicated. The narrow, winding staircase seemed to descend forever, the air growing colder and heavier with each step. Finally, they reached the bottom, where a heavy wooden door barred their way. Emily's hand shook as she turned the ancient, rusted handle. The door creaked open, revealing a large chamber lit by flickering candles. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and in the center of the room stood an altar, upon which lay a black, pulsating crystal, identical to the one Emily had shattered. "This is it," Emily whispered. "This is the source of the darkness." Her parents looked at her with concern, but they stood by her side. "We're with you, Emily," Robert said firmly. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Emily approached the altar, feeling the malevolent energy radiating from the crystal. She knew she had to destroy it, but the darkness seemed to resist her every move. Summoning all her courage, she reached for the crystal, her fingers tingling with its cold, dark power. As she touched it, the room exploded with light, and the darkness surged around her, whispering threats and promises of doom. Emily felt herself being pulled into the abyss, but she held on, focusing on the locket and the spirits of the Hawthorne family. "You cannot defeat me," the dark voice hissed. "I am eternal." Emily's grip tightened on the crystal. "No," she said through gritted teeth. "You are a shadow, and shadows can be banished by the light." With a final, desperate effort, she shattered the crystal against the altar. The darkness screamed in fury and pain, its power dissipating into the air. The symbols on the walls faded, and the candles flickered out, leaving the chamber in pitch darkness. Emily felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her, but she knew the battle was won. The malevolent presence was gone, its hold on the Hawthorne mansion finally broken. As they made their way back up the stairs, Emily felt a sense of peace and closure. The whispers had ceased, and the air felt lighter. The spirits of the Hawthorne family were free, and the darkness had been vanquished. Back in her room that night, Emily placed the locket and the diary on her bedside table. The dollhouse stood quiet and still, its malevolent energy gone. She knew she had faced the darkness and won, but she also knew the memory of the ghostly dollhouse would stay with her forever. In the days following the destruction of the crystal, Emily and her family began to feel a sense of normalcy returning to their lives. The dollhouse remained silent and still, a relic of the horrors they had faced. However, a lingering unease hung in the air, as if the malevolent force had left behind a shadow of its presence. One evening, as Emily was preparing for bed, she noticed a new entry in the diary that hadn't been there before. Her hands shook as she read the words scrawled in hurried, trembling handwriting. "We are free, but the darkness is not vanquished. Beware, for it seeks a new host. The curse is relentless. Stay vigilant." Emily's heart raced. The warning was clear. The malevolent force had not been destroyed, only displaced. It was searching for a new victim, and she knew her family could still be in danger. She ran to her parents, showing them the new entry. Alice and Robert read the words, their faces growing pale. "We need to find a way to protect ourselves," Robert said, his voice steady but filled with concern. That night, the family gathered in the living room to discuss their next steps. They agreed to seek help from experts who might have knowledge of such dark forces. The historian, Mr. Thompson, had been a valuable ally, and they decided to consult with him again. The next day, Mr. Thompson arrived, bringing with him a friend, Dr. Evelyn Hart, a renowned paranormal investigator. Dr. Hart was a tall, stern woman with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through Emily. "Tell me everything," Dr. Hart said, setting her briefcase on the coffee table. "No detail is too small." Emily recounted the events from the moment she received the dollhouse to the destruction of the crystal and the appearance of the final warning. Dr. Hart listened intently, taking notes and occasionally nodding. "You've done well to get this far," she said finally, "but the presence you encountered is ancient and powerful. It won't give up easily." Dr. Hart explained that the entity was likely a form of dark energy that fed on fear and despair. By destroying the crystal, they had weakened it, but it would try to find a new way to manifest. "We need to seal the dollhouse," Dr. Hart continued. "It's still a conduit for the entity. We must close off any remaining connections to prevent it from returning." She opened her briefcase and removed several items: candles, vials of liquid, and a book filled with arcane symbols. She instructed the family to form a circle around the dollhouse, holding hands while she performed the ritual. As Dr. Hart chanted in a language Emily didn't understand, the room grew cold, and a palpable tension filled the air. The candles flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Emily felt a strange sensation, as if they were being watched by unseen eyes. "Focus," Dr. Hart said sharply. "Do not let your minds wander." The ritual continued for what felt like hours, the air thick with energy. Finally, Dr. Hart poured the contents of the vials over the dollhouse, and the candles flared brightly before extinguishing all at once. The room fell silent. "It is done, Doctor," Hart said, her voice weary but confident. "The dollhouse is sealed, and the entity cannot use it as a gateway anymore." Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The tension in the room eased, and she felt a sense of relief wash over her. However, Dr. Hart's next words sent a shiver down her spine. "Remember, this is not a permanent solution," she warned. "The entity will continue to seek a way back. You must remain vigilant and strong. Do not let fear take hold." Over the next few weeks, Emily and her family adjusted to their new reality. They took extra precautions, such as placing protective charms around the house and keeping a close eye on the dollhouse. Dr. Hart checked in regularly, ensuring that no new signs of the entity appeared. Despite their efforts, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was not yet over. One night, as she lay in bed, she heard a faint whisper, a single word that sent chills down her spine. "Soon." The whisper was a stark reminder that the darkness was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Emily knew she had to stay strong, for herself and her family. The final warning had been clear. The curse was relentless, and the fight was far from over. Emily fell asleep clutching the locket, a symbol of the courage and resilience she would need to face whatever came next. As she drifted off, she vowed to protect her family from the unseen forces that threatened them, no matter the cost. Emily awoke with a start, the memory of the chilling whisper still fresh in her mind. Soon. The single word echoed in her thoughts, a constant reminder that the darkness was not defeated. Determined to find a permanent solution, she knew she had to act quickly before the malevolent force could regain its strength. She spent the morning researching ancient curses and protective rituals, reaching out to anyone who might have more knowledge about such dark entities. Mr. Thompson and Dr. Hart continued to be invaluable allies, providing historical context and practical advice. "Emily, you must understand," Dr. Hart said during one of their meetings. "The entity is cunning and relentless. It will exploit any weakness it finds. We must find the original source of the curse and neutralize it completely." As they delved deeper into the Hawthorne family history, they uncovered a disturbing pattern. The mansion's original owner, James Hawthorne, had indeed been involved in dark rituals, but his actions were part of an even older and more sinister tradition. The land on which the mansion was built had a dark history, stretching back centuries to when a coven of witches had been executed there. Their dying curse had tainted the ground, creating a wellspring of malevolent energy. "We need to perform a cleansing ritual on the land itself," Dr. Hart explained. "It's the only way to sever the connection and dissipate the dark energy once and for all." The plan was dangerous and complex. The cleansing ritual required specific herbs, symbols, and incantations, many of which were difficult to find. Moreover, the ritual had to be performed at midnight under a full moon, which was only a few days away. Emily and her parents, along with Mr. Thompson and Dr. Hart, prepared feverishly, gathering the necessary materials and practicing the incantations. The night of the full moon arrived, and the group made their way to the Hawthorne mansion. The air was thick with tension as they approached the dilapidated structure, its shadow looming ominously in the moonlight. Emily felt a mixture of fear and determination as they set up their ritual circle in the overgrown yard, directly over the spot where the witches had been executed. Dr. Hart took charge, her voice steady and commanding. "Remember, focus your energy and your intent. We are here to cleanse this place and free it from the darkness that has held it for so long." They lit candles and incense, their combined light casting eerie shadows across the ground. The air grew colder as they began the ritual, chanting in unison. Emily felt a strange energy coursing through her, a connection to the past and the present, to the land and the spirits that dwelled within it. As the ritual progressed, the ground beneath them seemed to tremble, and a low, guttural growl emanated from the earth. The malevolent presence was fighting back, unwilling to be banished. Emily tightened her grip on the locket, drawing strength from the spirits of the Hawthorne family. "You cannot defeat me," the dark voice roared, echoing through the night. "We must hold strong." Dr. Hart shouted, her voice rising above the growing din. "Keep chanting." The group continued their incantations, their voices merging into a powerful, harmonious force. Emily felt the locket grow warm in her hand, pulsing with energy. She closed her eyes, focusing all her willpower on the task at hand. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the center of the circle, illuminating the entire yard. The ground shook violently, and a high-pitched scream pierced the air. Emily felt the darkness recoil, its power waning. With a final, collective effort, they completed the ritual, and the light intensified, engulfing everything in a brilliant, purifying glow. The malevolent presence let out one last agonized scream before it was ripped from the earth, dissipating into the night. As the light faded, the group collapsed to the ground, exhausted but triumphant. The air felt lighter, and the oppressive atmosphere that had hung over the mansion for centuries was gone. "It's over, Doctor," Hart said, her voice filled with relief. "The curse is broken." Emily felt a wave of gratitude and peace wash over her. The land was cleansed, and the spirits of the Hawthorne family were finally at rest. She looked up at the sky, where the full moon shone brightly, free of the darkness that had tainted it for so long. In the days that followed, Emily and her family returned to their normal lives, though the memory of their ordeal remained. The dollhouse, now just an ordinary toy, stood as a silent reminder of the darkness they had overcome. Emily kept the locket and the diary as tokens of her journey, symbols of the strength and courage she had discovered within herself. Though the fight was over, Emily knew she would always carry the lessons she had learned. The darkness could be defeated, but it required vigilance, determination, and the support of those who believed in her. And as she looked forward to the future, she felt confident that she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The cleansing ritual at the Hawthorne Mansion had lifted a tremendous weight off Emily's shoulders. The oppressive atmosphere that had once pervaded her life was gone, replaced by a newfound sense of peace and clarity. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, she couldn't shake the feeling that the echoes of the past still lingered, whispering softly in the quiet moments of her day. One afternoon, as Emily was sorting through some old boxes in the attic, she came across a dusty, leather-bound book that she hadn't seen before. Curious, she opened it and found that it was a journal, but not one she recognized. The handwriting was neat and precise, filled with detailed accounts of rituals, symbols, and protective incantations. It appeared to be a guide to understanding and combating dark forces. Realizing the importance of the book, Emily decided to show it to Dr. Hart. The next day, she and her parents visited the paranormal investigator, who examined the journal with great interest. "This is quite a find, Emily," Dr. Hart said, her eyes scanning the pages. "It appears to be a comprehensive guide to the rituals and symbols used by those who fought against dark entities like the one you encountered. This knowledge could be invaluable in ensuring the darkness doesn't return." Feeling a renewed sense of purpose, Emily spent the following weeks studying the journal. She learned about the ancient practices used to protect against malevolent forces and how to create protective wards. With Dr. Hart's guidance, she and her family placed these wards around their home, reinforcing the barrier against any potential threats. One evening, as the family gathered in the living room, Emily's father, Robert, spoke up. "Emily, you've shown incredible bravery and determination throughout this entire ordeal. Your strength has been an inspiration to all of us." Alice nodded in agreement. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart. You've faced unimaginable horrors and emerged stronger than ever. We want you to know that we're here for you, no matter what." Emily felt a surge of warmth and gratitude. Her family's support had been her rock, and their words filled her with a sense of accomplishment. She knew that the journey had changed her, but it had also brought them closer together. As the months passed, life gradually returned to normal. Emily excelled in school, her confidence and determination shining through in her studies and friendships. The dollhouse, now a mere decorative piece, sat quietly on a shelf in her room, a reminder of the trials she had overcome. One sunny afternoon, Emily received a letter from Mrs. Dawson, the librarian who had helped her research the Hawthorne Mansion. Mrs. Dawson wrote to tell her about a new exhibit at the local museum dedicated to the history of the mansion and the mysterious events that had occurred there. She invited Emily and her family to the grand opening, acknowledging Emily's pivotal role in uncovering the truth. Excited and honored, Emily agreed to attend. The exhibit was a stunning display of artifacts, photographs, and documents related to the Hawthorne family and their tragic history. As she walked through the exhibit, Emily felt a profound connection to the past, as if she were walking alongside the spirits she had freed. Near the end of the exhibit, a small plaque caught her eye. It read, "In memory of the brave souls who faced the darkness and emerged victorious. May their courage and resilience inspire us all." Emily smiled, feeling a sense of closure and peace. The darkness that had once threatened her and her family was gone, and in its place was a legacy of bravery and strength. As the evening drew to a close, Emily stood outside the museum, looking up at the night sky. The stars twinkled brightly, free of the shadows that had once loomed over them. She knew that while the past would always be a part of her, it no longer held any power over her. She had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, stronger and more resilient than ever. And as she walked home with her family, hand in hand, Emily felt a deep sense of gratitude and hope. The echoes of the past had been transformed into echoes of freedom, and she was ready to embrace whatever the future held.